Recently, there's been footage released from the Reason rally of Thunderfoot essentially debating or really engaging in a conversation with one Eric Hovind. And this has stirred quite a bit of controversy from both sides. At one point in the video, Eric Hovind asked Thunderfoot, "Can you be absolutely sure that God does not exist?" And rather than trying to answer the question directly, Thunderfoot told him that yes, it was a malinformed question. And while that is true, I feel that, well, he could have answered differently and in a way that might not make him look quite as bad. Now, keep in mind that Thunderfoot provided a perfectly legitimate answer to Eric Hovind's question. Um, it wasn't a direct answer, no, but it was an answer that I believe sufficed for purposes of discussion. However, some people on YouTube seem to think that he was avoiding the question. Now, first of all, I am personally subscribed to Thunderfoot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I support everything he says and does. And in this instance, I feel that while he did provide a decent answer, I could have thought of a few other things I would have liked to do in his position. Now, I would like to voice what I would have said to Eric Hovind or any other theist who tries to ask me this sort of question. And keep in mind, this is not like some be all and end all to this particular question. It's just what I think, and whether or not you think it's an efficient or even accurate answer to the question is entirely up to you. I would first like to point out how this question is, as Thunderfoot said, fairly nonsensical, because Eric Hovind failed to define what he believes, or what he defines as a god, how his god is separate from all the other gods that have existed in history, and why his god happens to be the one true God versus all the other ones, and why it's important to illustrate the physical characteristics of this God through defining what a God is mainly because a lot of the physical characteristics of, let's just say, the Judeo-Christian God happen to be very much contradictive, i.e., can God make a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? Is he so powerful that he can make himself forget something or not know something? If he's in all places at all times, can he somehow not be in all places in all times? Like, these sort of questions can be posed to a theist who would assume or define God as a being who is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. And as you can see, there is a bit of dissonance between these three attributes of a God. But let's just say I ignore that, and we establish that this God somehow has all the capabilities that it does, that gods have been described as having all power, all knowledge, being all good. Is it possible for me to say that I know with certainty that a God doesn't exist? No. The short answer of this would be no. It's impossible for me to say that. Any humble, any self-honest person would say that it's impossible to know that a God exists or doesn't exist. So if I can't say with even a slight shred of certainty that God doesn't exist, why am I even an atheist? First of all, I'm not a theologian, I'm not a creationist, so I don't take that side. I rely entirely on physical evidence, mainly physical evidence that's been verified through official sources, through the scientific method, peer-reviewed by other experts in that field. So, you can argue for God's existence all you want through things like kalam, through ontological, through teleological arguments, etc. You can argue all you want for the existence of God. It doesn't prove that a God exists. It definitely doesn't prove that your God exists. And until I see that evidence, I will remain unconvinced that a God exists. In the same way that I am unconvinced when a child tells me that ghosts exist, or that boogeymen exist, or witches and wizards and warlocks exist. I don't believe in any of these things for the same reason I don't believe in God, because there's been a lack of physical evidence to suggest that there is. And again, just because I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the evidence to suggest with any amount of certainty that a God doesn't exist. That's not a good enough excuse for me to just close the book and fill in the gaps with whatever sounds like it's going to fill in the gaps, whatever sounds most appealing to me. That to me has always sounded fairly dishonest, and it never sounded like a good approach to intellectual inquiry. Then again, you could always approach the theist's question with asking them a question of their own. Define what a god is or is not without contradicting yourself. And I guarantee to any theist in my audience that's a lot more difficult than it sounds. So, what are your thoughts on this Eric Hovind Thunderfoot thing? Leave your comments down below. Thanks for watching, and may the truth always be heard. Later.